is Kat Moonchild. I am a psychic, I am a medium, and I am also a Reiki master and a shaman in training. How long have you heard that? I have been working with animals much longer though than just my shaman training. So that's what we're talking about today, working with animal spirits 101. Let's go. As you work with animals is actually just doing this is by walking. So first what we're going to be talking about is animal medicine or animal totems. That's really common, really popular. So when I'm taking a walk, I'll actually notice what animals are most around me. I'm seeing a lot of squirrels. I'm seeing a lot of fowl, like duck. And I'll just start taking mental notes of what I'm seeing the most. Here's a squirrel. This would be my third one today. Obviously, when you're looking for animal totems, one of the best things to do is actually move into some place that is most commonly very nature oriented. I have a ton of water around me. I decided that it would be appropriate to actually do the video out in nature because we're talking about working with nature. Animal totems, very often people feel are most commonly wolf or bear or eagle or hawk or all these super interesting things. But what a lot of people don't know is that animal totems can also take the form of insects or the creepy crawlies. Those are the most popular, common that show up for people actually, because honestly insects are the largest, most common animal form in all of the earth. There are billions upon billions upon billions, hundreds of billions of insects, tens of thousands, millions of varieties of insects. And what will happen is that people will focus in on the things that they like. One of my fixed totems, which the difference between fixed and power animal is, a fixed totem is something that is with you lifelong, whereas a power animal will come in and out as it teaches you medicine. The idea of animal totems is actually a Native American thought process, and it's really important that we're honoring that. It's not something that's in every indigenous Native American culture, but it is found in indigenous cultures around the world. So for the shamanism practice that I'm doing currently, it does include power animal or animal totems as well, but they're not called totems. They are called power animals. Those in that particular practice do stay with you lifelong, and you do want to form a relationship with these spirits because these are spirits. They can act as spirit guides or guardian spirits. So one of my fixed totems that have been with me lifelong, and I'm using or coining that term, is actually the cockroach. And it actually became a running joke that the cockroach was one of my fixed totems. The medicine of that is survival, adaptability, strength, power. Those are the things that people don't think of. The meanings of the animals are derived from their behaviors, their symbolism, and that's the biggest thing we want to understand when we're working with animal medicine, is we're working with the symbolism of that animal. I like to say that when you start noticing or seeing an animal, whether in picture, in thought, vision, dream, that it's usually a fixed totem when it's something that you've had a significant experience with since childhood, even in terms of fear. So a lot of people are afraid of snakes, a lot of people are afraid of spiders, and those animals will try to bring in medicine to people's lives to teach them not to be afraid of that particular thing. So with the snake medicine, for example, can be about life, death, rebirth, the cycle of life, and some people are very scared of that. So it's teaching them not to take that in, to shed things, to not be afraid of darkness or the poisons that we may experience in life. This is just a really good example of a totem that a lot of people are afraid of. And when you're thinking of animal medicines, these are the things you want to kind of keep in mind when you're working with them. You want to think of things that you are even scared of or things that you don't like, because those very well can be power animals. You can find information on different animals just by simply Googling animal medicine, animal speak, animal totem, followed by the animal, such as turtle animal speak or turtle animal totem. One of the best books is Animal Speak by Ted Andrews. I find it to be very good, and he's also got one about power animals that is very good to also kind of look at. So those are things that are a good reference or a good resource. When you first begin to work with animal totems, and you have a very, very strong focus on working with those animal totems, one of the things that you also want to know is that animals will very often start showing up in your life in very uncomfortable ways. They will come into your house, they will land on you, they will approach you, and a lot of people think it's very Snow White, disclaimer. Or they will think of a bird landing on them, whereas that was definitely not my experience, and not a lot of the experiences that people will find. They will have bees land on them, or ants bite them, or they will have a cockroach land on them. Snakes show up in their path, oftentimes in their path as they're walking. The part of working with animal medicine that's difficult to get used to. A lot of times when we are working with animal medicine, we still have to remember that even though we're connecting with these animals on a deeper level, they're still wild, okay? They can still pose danger to us. We don't want to mess with the animal or harass the animal, even if it's an animal that approaches us. I've had squirrels come up to me, but I'm still very aware that that squirrel can bite, may carry disease. I still am probably braver than I should be, but even though I have a comfort, I still have the awareness of what this animal can do, what this animal is capable of, respecting their personal space, respecting their fear space. They will still have an instinctual reaction to me, even if they're sensing the fact that I do not mean harm. Just remember, like, basic safety precaution. Take care of yourself when you're beginning your journey on working with animals, especially as they become more frequent in your path or they show up more often. When you do have an animal bite you, it is trying to teach you the wisdom of that medicine. I'm not encouraging to get bit, but it will happen. Unfortunately, we will get bit by animals occasionally, whether it's just an insect bite, but things even like mosquitoes are medicine too. The biggest takeaway we really should have when working with animal totems is that we have to remember, again, everything has a meaning. So just keep that in mind when you're working with animal totems, is you don't want to disregard any little thing that comes across your path. And as well as everything has a purpose here. I feel like that's something important we know. Everything in this ecosystem plays a part or a role or a factor in our lives. They keep the earth healthy, even if we don't like the particular species of animal that we're dealing with. Those things do have a purpose. So don't disregard anything you see. And next, we're actually going to move on to animal psychic communication. So after talking about that, animal psychic communication with a living animal oftentimes will present itself as emotional or imagery. So when you're learning to communicate with animal on a psychic level, living animal, whether it's your pet or whether it's an animal outside, you want to project your thought or your emotion at it. And oftentimes the messages do come more through as emotional messages. When speaking to an animal, a lot of animals have a very simplistic intelligence, even if they are complex creatures with emotion. I'm hungry, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated. Usually the emotion is a singular emotion that overtakes the animal, whatever it is that they're feeling or thinking about, curiosity, whereas humans will have multi-layered emotion that are often complex, which is what we say is like higher thought. But that doesn't mean that the animals don't have opinion, for something they like, they don't like. We all know that, like picky eaters, right? Picky cats, picky dogs, they don't like certain foods, they like certain smells, they don't like certain smells, they like bugs, they don't like bugs. This is how we can connect to our animals, is by understanding that they do have an emotional base, and they will mostly communicate with us in again, a singular thought or emotion. And this happens more often with our domesticated animals. Wild animals as much are running more on a survival mechanism or survival instinct. So just like with humans that are running on survival mechanism or survival instinct, those humans are harder to connect to on an emotional basis. It's the same with animals. Animals that feel safe, warm, and loved will have a more diverse language or complex language. That doesn't mean that when you're communicating with an animal, messages won't come through like a spirit message would, like for somebody who would pass. You can get word from animal depending on the intelligence of the animal, just like all creatures, just like humans. Some unfortunately are more smart than others. Depending on the complexity of its thought process and how deeply you connect with that animal. So I've only had word-based message from certain pets that were the pets I would not expect. I've gotten it from a cat. I've gotten it from a tarantula, a pet rat, and a pet fish, which would have been animals I did not expect to hear word message from, but those are the ones. And usually it was something like, I'm hungry, I want my cage cleaned. Whereas with the rat, it was more complex, where there was more of an emotional basis of love or communion, as rats are very social creatures. So that was translated through the messages much deeper than, say, the tarantula, who would just tell me when it wanted to be fed, or its comfort level. The messages were fairly simple, except for the rat. The rat did have more companionable messages, such as wanting to play or seeing me in a paternal, maternal way. That was my experience with animal communication. When I do psychic communication with animals, the way that they see themselves oftentimes changes. I oftentimes don't get the right breed of dog, or I get a sense of just the length of hair. Maybe color will be different. And when I'm doing pet communication, most of what comes through is personality more than anything else. So that's something to know. That's just a very quick cap on psychic animal communication. Again, you want to focus on sending the emotion to the animal, and being open, receptive to feeling and imagery. If you are not a very visual person, just focus in on your claircognizance, which is your knowing, or your clairsentience, which is your feeling. And we'll continue having company with the cat, because why not? This is an animal communication video. The last thing that I wanted to communicate about was actually animals that have crossed over the rainbow bridge. This was actually part of the video that somebody wanted me to communicate with them on. I had somebody ask specifically about animal communication for those that have passed. So now that we've talked about those animals that are still living, let's talk about those that have crossed over the rainbow bridge. Animals that have crossed, oftentimes there's a thought process that wild animals don't cross rainbow bridge, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I do feel that animals that are wild can cross over the rainbow bridge because they still do have a consciousness or an emotional base, and I feel that that's where the soul connection is. So just like with live animal communication, sorry about the sirens, just like with live animal communication, animals that have crossed over the rainbow bridge will also communicate through feeling and imagery, but will have more in-depth emotional processes. One of the strongest ways of communication for a lot of people is dreams, when they connect with an animal that has crossed over. A lot of people will say that they come through dreams the most. When the animal is still earthbound, it will actually be something that you can physically see the presence of that animal. An animal may choose to stay with you lifelong, especially if you had a particular bond, especially if it was a familiar. The difference between a familiar and a regular pet is a familiar is a soulmate type connection. I have had maybe one familiar or two familiars. I have not had a lot of familiars, and familiars are not very common animals that come through. But those particular animals that you have a very strong bond with, that become family, will choose to stay. You may smell certain smells for the animal. You may feel the weight of that animal, hear it purring, hear the nails on the floor clacking, just like with the human spirit, where you may smell cigar smoke, or you may feel the presence. You will feel the presence of the animal. Communication, again, is very similar to live animal communication, feeling, imagery, but the projected thoughts will be much more clear. So communication with an animal that is crossed will have more word basis or emotion basis than an animal that is currently living, as their vision has broadened or their perspective has broadened. There are some animals that do have human souls. There are some animals that do have human-like intelligence, or human-like communication, and can communicate with us on a very, very deep level this way. So that's something else to keep in mind. Most of the time when you're trying to connect with an animal that is crossed, you want to really focus on setting your intention with anything else. You ask that that animal come through, or you ask that that animal be brought forth to you. The archangel that is the patron of animals is Archangel Ariel. Archangel Ariel works very much with animals. So if you're wanting to work with an angel to connect with animals, it would be Archangel Ariel. That's actually it. Working with animals is much more simple. A lot of psychics seem to struggle with being pet psychic or animal psychic, probably because they're expecting it to be much more complex than it is. It's actually very easy to connect with animal or work with animal. Especially as an empath, because again, most of it is formed in the basis of emotion. So if you are an empath, animal work will be much easier for you to perform than really a lot of other things. It's much easier to read the emotion of an animal than it is a human. You can perform energy healing on an animal through Reiki. I find working energy on an animal to be an uncomfortable process for me, but for a lot of people it's a lot easier. I find that energy gets stuck on an animal a lot stronger than it does a human for me, but that's just me. Everyone is different. If there is anything that I need to expand on, or anything that anyone would like a more in-depth explanation on or process on, please feel free to leave a comment down below. It was just a really quick video that I wanted to kind of touch on, because that was something that was asked, is how do you do animal communications? And these are different ways that you can work with animal spirits, living, past, and archetypal. Remember, every animal means something. Every animal has a purpose, and they're an important part of this planet. So keep that in mind when you're working with these animals, and don't discriminate against the messages they have to bring to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Check out my TikTok for more videos. I do small tips and tricks on TikTok, so that's somewhere else that you can keep up with me to learn more. I'll catch you on